But, Mark, let's move on into our last segment. And if you're on YouTube, you got some catching up to do because we got a 1 through 10 for this mock draft. We got an 11 through 21 that you got to catch up on, of course, after you watch this one. Because this is why you came to MVP and you came to the onside kick. Before we get into our last part of the draft, make sure to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Ricky Widmer. Mark is at with 2 E's, Mark Weber. And then also Most Valuable Pod Most Valuable Podcast at Most Valuable Pod. I think because of the Twitter, Most Valuable Podcast has just become Most Valuable Pod to me. At Most Valuable Pod is our Twitter for MVP. But Mark, let's start it off before we talk about what we're going to talk about in this segment. Give us your last part of the draft, 22 through 32.
22 Ravens going to Chris Lindstrom, the guard out of Boston College. Then we got the Texans going with Cody Ford, offensive lineman out of Oklahoma. Then we got 24 Raiders via the Bears, Brian Burns, the edge rusher out of Florida State. I think we both did that same thing. Just call him an edge rusher.
Bernie Burns, baby.
Eagles, Byron Murphy, cornerback out of Washington. Then we got the Colts going to Greg Little, tackle out of Ole Miss. Took a little bit of a tumble here. Ed Oliver, the defensive lineman out of Houston, going to the Raiders via the Cowboys. Chargers, Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle out of Clemson. Realistically, I'm going to admit, those two probably should be switched, but whatever, it's too late.
You're talking about Wilkins above Oliver?
No, Wilkins and his buddy Dexter Lawrence. Those two probably should be switched.
That's why
it's too late.
I was a little confused.
When you brought it up, I looked at it and I was like, oh yeah, Christian Wilkins is the better of the two. Whatever, doesn't matter.
We got it in our mock draft.
If you want a 3-4 type of defense, Dexter Lawrence is your guy. But anyways, Chiefs going to Devin Bush, linebacker out of Michigan. Packers going to go with Ja'Kai Polite, defensive end, Florida. Then the Rams going Jonathan Abrams, safety, Mississippi State. And finally, Patriots, they're going to go with TJ Hawkinson, the tight end out of Iowa.
So,
2 tight ends, 2 Iowa tight ends.
So you know what I just noticed?
What's that?
What did I say at the beginning of the podcast that I had to do before the third segment, Mark?
Now you got to learn how to pronounce his name.
Yeah, I got to learn how to pronounce it.
Too late.
So I'm going to say it right now. There's going to be a name here that I butcher royally.
It happens.
So you're going to have to help me out with that. I am calling on the real MVPs to help me out. But at number 22, A.J. Brown, the wide receiver of Ole Miss, going to the Baltimore Ravens.
And that was the one you were going to butcher, too. Wow, you did a good job.
Yeah, that was it. Then his teammate, Greg Little, offensive tackle from Ole Miss, going to the Texans at 23. Then the Raiders at 24. Ooh, that was another thing I was going to change potentially. Let me see. No, screw it. I'm not going to change it. Raiders will take Josh Jacobs, the running back from Alabama. Then the Eagles at 25 go DeAndre Baker, cornerback from the Georgia Bulldogs. Then the Colts at 26 go Taylor Rapp, the safety from the Washington Huskies. Then the Raiders again, this time via the Cowboys, go Parrish Campbell, the wide receiver from the Ohio State University. Chargers at 28 go Andre Dillard, the offensive tackle from the Washington State Cougars. Then at 29, this is the name, Mark, so bear with me. Amani Urowori? Sure. I think that's right. The cornerback from Penn State. Please help me if I'm wrong there. Then the Packers via the Saints at 30 go Noah Fant, or as Mark likes to call him, Noah Fart, out of the Iowa tight end. Then the Rams at 31 go Cody Ford, offensive guard from the Oklahoma Sooners. And then the Patriots round up the first round, not going with Daniel Jones. They will go Jared Tillery, the defensive tackle from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Fun stuff.
And the first thing I want to talk about, Mark, is the Green Bay Packers. And I waited to put them in this one because now we have both of their picks. It's kind of like a giant thing. Both of their picks are now made where at 12, you had them go with Rashawn Gary. I had them go at Clelin Ferrell, so we both had them go with a pass rusher. Down here, I had them go tight end. You had them go at double pass rusher. What are you thinking for the Green Bay Packers?
Did the Packers not make it obvious what they're trying to do via free agency? Defense? It's defense, right? So they are saying, we got to go against Kirk Cousins, who's good, and they got a good running game. Maybe one day they'll have an offensive line.
The Bears.
We got to go against the Bears. who have good running backs, good wide receivers, good quarterback, and Matthew Stafford is still there. So, the Lions are there. The Packers are saying we desperately need defense. They saw the Vikings have a good defense and be successful. They saw the Bears have a great defense and be successful. They say, can we have some of that too? And what do both those teams have? Good pass rushes. That's why for me, and I know that the odds of them actually going double defensive end, it's a little not going to happen. But this is them saying, we need to get two quarterbacks. We need to do it desperately. We are going to do everything we can to go ahead and make sure our defense is solid and that quarterbacks feel the pressure of this Green Bay defense. Is it a risky thing for them to do? Yes. Are people going to laugh at them if they do it? Probably. But this is a surefire way to say we will pressure quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that I am kind of thinking about right now is the reason why I had them go with tight end is because, like you said, yes, they're going to go against great offenses, but they're going to go against some pretty good defenses as well.
They sure will.
The Bears' defense is for real. The Vikings' defense is for real. Thank God we kept Anthony Barr. But the thing that I look at, too, and I'm not saying they should go here, but they need to take, to me, with one of these two picks, a wide receiver or a tight end. The reason why I say that
But they got Mercedes Lewis.
Well, they have Mercedes Lewis. Jimmy Graham, let's be honest, they haven't even been using him that much with the Packers. I think a guy like Noah Fant would be nice to have there, an athletic tight end for Aaron Rodgers to throw to. But, like, even if they went wide receiver, because the thing that I think about, and, like, maybe I'm wrong, maybe a Packer fan can tell me I'm wrong, because obviously these are two guys that they want talking about their team, a Bears fan and a Viking fan. But I look at their wide receivers. I love Gemo. Got to throw it out to my Fighting Illini, Gemo Allison. Devonta Adams is still there. Then Equanimeous St. Brown, who I was very high on last year. But they also Alan Lazar, who I was high on in the draft last year. But they lose Randall Cobb. He is now a Dallas Cowboy. How big of a deal is losing Randall Cobb, and should they look to replace him in the first round of this draft if there's a wide receiver that's there? Because, like, for you, there's really nobody there that might be worth the first round grade. But, like, on my end, I could have had them at 30 go with N'Keal Harry. Like, he was still there and available.
Could they? Sure. They could definitely go with a wide receiver. Aaron Rodgers had proven that he can make wide receivers better than they are. And I'm not super worried about that, although I'm sure they would love to have it. I still think the thing they've made obvious is they know they need a better defense. They have almost never given Aaron Rodgers a quality defense. And they're correcting that mistake. And frankly, as a Chicago Bears fan, it kind of scares me that they're going to try and correct that mistake because that's the thing that opposing teams can take advantage of to say, yes, Aaron Rodgers is going to score points on you, but our offense is going to score points just fine as well. Then if they take that away, then this Packers team becomes scary again. Which they haven't been in the last few years.
No, and I know that a lot of it too has come Aaron Rodgers' injury. I just look at it and I'm like, I don't think with their 12th overall pick they look for offense. There's a reason why you and I both had them go defensive end there. But like I look at this team and I go, oh, I think they need to look at offense in this draft, because I'll even look up how many draft picks do they have overall. They have 10 draft picks this year. They're going to have they have one in every single round, and then 2 in the first, 2 in the fourth, 2 in the sixth. So, I mean, they could use some of those to move up, but realistically looking where they're at, I mean, I don't think they might not make all 10 picks, but I don't really see them being a team that's going to be like, hey, let's try to trade up to have less picks, unless it's somebody that they're like, we have to have this one guy, because I'd rather have him than two guys of different positions or different players.
It's going to be very interesting to me to see what the Packers, like how their free agency class pans out. A lot of times when people pay big in free agency for a lot of players, it doesn't work out very well.
Because they even took a guy from your team in Adrian Amos.
Yeah. and we did a safety swap. We got HaHa Clinton Dix. So,
True.
Which I'm actually thrilled about because I wanted HaHa Clinton Dix in that draft. I was like, hey, we finally got the guy. So it's going to be interesting to see how that swap goes. Those two are going to be talked about a lot. But just that team, it's going to be very interesting to see how they do because of the fact that they did spend money, which is something the Packers never do.
What about, this is interesting. Before we get into the next guy, this is, of course, we don't have to get into this. I just want a quick reaction for this. Do you want to hear who the Raiders just signed for a 1-year deal? Vontez Burfict.
I knew it was going to happen.
Is he a Gruden grinder?
He's a Gruden grinder.
He'll also fucking injure the other team.
Can we get bans in the NFL just like permanent? No, you're gone.
I wouldn't hate if he was just.
He's one of those guys where it's just like, no, just go. One of the dirtiest players in the NFL. No doubt about
I saw that, and I'm like, I have to mention it as he gets a 1-year deal.
The only team that would have him.
Also, and this just happened live as we're recording this. Since we're talking about the Packers, Clay Matthews is going to the Rams.
Oh,
signed a 2-year deal with the LA Rams, so he won't be in Green Bay for sure.
With both of these, as the Bear fan in me was like, don't say Justin Houston. Don't say Justin Houston. There's still hope he might come to Chicago. It's not going to happen, but there's still hope.
Let's move on, though, into the next guy I did want to talk about, and that is Ed Oliver. He's a guy that Brandon and I mentioned on the big board discussion that we had, because if I go over to, let me pull up my big board, because I don't know if it's the exact same as how I had my mock draft. I think he's a little bit higher, actually. But like on my NFL big board, I had him at 18, so he ended up exactly where I had him on the big board. Brandon had him at 20, and in our mock, I had him, like I said, 18. He sits right there at the Vikings. You have him 27 to the Raiders. What's going on with Ed Oliver, and is he officially, remember way back at the beginning of the draft season, I asked you who would be the one guy that falls. Is he now that guy?
He has been for me for a long time. He's kept falling further and further and further down my draft board. I don't think that anything like combines and pro days really help out, because to me the big problem with Ed Oliver, he's a tweener. He's not a defensive tackle. He's not a defensive end. He's neither one of these positions. So teams need him to bulk up or slim down, and he's got to commit to that. And it works on a team like the Raiders, I feel like, because they're a team that needs a lot of things, and especially on defense. They did so much for their offense. Any Raider fan out there was like, but what about our defense? It's nice that we can score points now, but we're not going to stop the other team. So they can put him wherever and make it work. To me, that's pretty much just what it is. I think teams would be a little nervous, a little scared with Ed Oliver, just because it's where do you put him? What do you view him as, and do you buy that he's going to do what he needs to do to become that position?
Well, and that's why for me, I kind of agreed with the analysis that, because I read the Todd McShay mock draft, and I agreed 110% with what because at first I was like, oh, offensive tackle easily, and I'm like, oh, wait, but Ed Oliver's there, and we just lost Sheldon Richardson. And what Todd McShay said, this is Ed Oliver to the Vikings, he said, so although offensive lineman is a more glaring immediate need here, the Vikings could plug Oliver into the middle of their defensive line between Everson Griffin and Daniel Hunter and create headaches for offensive coordinators. He's a perfect replacement for free agent Sheldon Richardson. And I looked at it and I'm like, hey, he's a perfect replacement, but is this the perfect situation for Ed Oliver? To where, yes, the biggest thing that people are going to look at as a negative for him is his height or his size and his length. But no one can deny that athletic ability that Ed Oliver has. And if he was just a little bit taller and a little bit longer, he would probably be a top 10 pick, no doubt.
Sure.
Like we had him towards the beginning of the year. And I look at it and like the reason why I had him go to the Vikings was I looked at that and went, of course, we've already got a stacked defense to where we can put him in I say there's not going to be any pressure, but at the same time, will there be pressure because he's being added to a playoff team?
Mm-hmm.
Or will that help him because, hey, I don't need to be the focal point of this defense. I don't need to be the front face of this defense. No one's going to be looking at me. Anthony Barr is the face of the defense. The defensive line, we've got Griffin and Hunter already there to where he could just kind of chill and just do what he does best. And if Mike Zimmer knows anything, it's defense, and he's proven that at the head coaching position ever since he came over to the Vikings. So that's why I kind of looked at Ed Oliver and was kind of like, okay, this is where I'm going to have him going. Do you think he falls any further than where you have him?
No, I wouldn't think that. He's still first-round talent. He could go in the middle. He could go towards the end. Mm-hmm. I still expect him to be a day one kind of guy.
How about the segue into the last thing I was going to mention, or the last team we were going to talk about?
Yeah.
The team you have him going to, the Raiders, because they're a team, 3 draft picks,
mm-hmm.
and now that they they trade for Antonio Brown, does that change anything? Like, people might look at my mock draft and go, Ricky, why did you have him go Paris Campbell? We just got Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think that's a valid question, but it's not like you're getting 2 Antonio Browns out there. You're getting different guys who can complement each other.
Well, and they didn't just get Antonio Brown. They got Tyrell Williams also. I keep forgetting to mention that.
Yeah, Tyrell Williams he's good, but he's not amazing necessarily. So, yes, I mean, Paris Campbell, some people might be upset with that. To me, I went 100% defense with a linebacker, a defensive end, and a defensive tackle just to get that front 7 and try and get some pressure because you're facing some pretty good quarterbacks out there. You're going to need it. That's a surefire thing. The thing that I'm a little torn on, because there's, of course, we mentioned it earlier, there's the rumors about, I hate to say it again, guys, Kyler Murray to the Raiders. Those rumors exist because Gruden likes him, apparently. They get Antonio Brown, and it makes you say, okay, they're giving Derek Carr weapons, right? But it also makes you say, well, I guess maybe they could just figure they're one player away. They get their Kyler Murray, and he's going to be successful in this offense. They did everything they could to give him pieces. But they're also the team that they've got the capital to trade anywhere they want, and they made a lot of moves, so maybe they're saying we don't need as many draft picks. We can afford to trade up for somebody if we want to, but I still think that they're a team that just is trying to fill those defensive holes. It's a defensive draft, and it's the perfect situation. They went to free agency for offense. They're going to go to the draft for defense, and they'll just build it up and give Derek Carr a little less pressure to put points on the board.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and I'll be completely honest. If you're someone that's already commented, Ricky, why'd you have him go at Paris Campbell? I'm starting to second guess that pick, and probably will not make that pick in the 6.0 because I'm looking even more into it, and it's like Antonio Brown, Tyrell Williams, J.J. Nelson. It's like they've picked up so many wide receivers to where will they draft one in the first round? To me, right now,
but they could. They really
could
want to.
if they want. Like, and Paris Campbell isn't a guy that's going to be a number 1 or a number 2. To me, he's that slot guy who just has that pure speed. That get him the ball on a slant route and just see what he can do with that speed. Like, I've loved his speed ever since I saw him, not this past year, but 2 years ago in that Indiana game where he just took a jet sweep and was gone.
Which is great because that middle of the field, those slants, Antonio Brown, that's not his game. It's somebody else that can do it.
Opens the field for it to where he can kind of work on the outside. The one position that I think the Raiders will target with one of these 3 picks is the running back position. It's why I had him go with Josh Jacobs with the Bear pick at 24. Because right now I look at their free agent signings and everything, I'm not seeing a running back. Like, a lot of defense, wide receivers, some offensive linemen. I am not seeing a single running back signed by them. Marshawn Lynch, gone. Doug Martin, gone. Right now, your starting running backs are Jalen Richard, DeAndre Washington. they worked fine for the Raiders in the past. Rashard used to be the starting running back before Martin and Beast Mode were even here. But I look at this and I go, one of these running backs, especially Josh Jacobs, because I think he's the best running back right now. If he is there, the Eagles could take him. The Chiefs could go ahead and look at him because they lose Kareem Hunt. Packers could look at him. Like, there are numerous teams that could look running back. Raiders at 24 might go, hey, this running back is here. We need a guy that we can kind of rely on to be our bell cow, to be that guy to take pressure off of Derek Carr so Derek Carr can get the ball to all these nice new shiny toys that we got for him in the receiving game. However, there even is the thought in my mind that, like, with 27, I'll be completely honest, if in the next mock draft, I'll do a Mark Weber situation where you said DK was going to go to the Bills. I will say this, unless Noah Fant is taken before 27, he will be my 27th pick to the Raiders instead of a Paris Campbell because they could use a tight end more so than a wide receiver.
Yeah. I just think for me, the Raiders, they've made the splash on offense. I just see them doing it. And I understand they could use a running back. Running back's one of those positions where it's easier to get a quality running back later in the draft than it is for a lot of other positions.
And I mean, that's an interesting point. Like, that is a fair point because they could even take, like, and of course I'm using guys that might be high right now because of what we've seen recently. Yeah. They could take a Justice Hill in on the first round, look at defense, look at wide receiver, tight end, if anything. Anybody in this last kind of region that you think we need to look at?
That we need to look at, not necessarily. I did buy in now, and I do have my 2 tight ends. I decided to do it. I gave Hawkinson his spot.
You know what? And this is going to suck for people at the end of the podcast, or who probably looked at the podcast early and then looked at and didn't pay attention this far through. I'm going to make a change to my mock draft. Am I allowed to do that?
I think earlier in this we said when you put it out there you can't.
Because I was just going to switch too. I wasn't going to put any more new.
Where are you going to switch?
Raiders and Packers switch. So Noah goes to the Raiders, Paris goes to the Packers.
I would hate that even more to have Paris Campbell go to the Packers.
Then I'll keep it.
Not because I think it's bad. I as a Bears fan, I would hate it. I think Paris Campbell's a great wide receiver.
Yeah, I'll switch it then. So if you're listening this late, haha, you got something no one else did. That I
surprise.
Switched.
Go put it in the comment section and brag.
Noah Fant, he will now be an Oakland Raider. And so my top 21, just real quickly, I'll read them off real quick. A.J. Brown to the Ravens, Greg Little to the Texans, Josh Jacobs Raiders, DeAndre Baker to the Eagles, Taylor Ratnow to the Colts, Noah Fant at 27 to the Raiders via the Cowboys, Andre Dillard to the Chargers, Amani Uruwari
still don't know how to say his name.
To the Chiefs. Packers now take Paris Campbell, and then Cody Ford to the Rams, Jerry Tillery to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And see, this is a little gift right at the end of the podcast. You make a little change, and that's the mock draft. But thank you guys for tuning in for our 5th mock draft. I love doing these. I mean, the only thing this year that is way different than last year is it's way more defensive this year, not as many quarterbacks as we are used to seeing. But let us know what you guys thought of any of our picks, any of the drafts, especially if you're listening to the full podcast on podcast services around the world. Make sure to check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/MostValuablePodcast. Make sure to hit us up on Twitter, at Ricky Widmer, at the Mark Weber, at Most Valuable Pod. And then also, if you're on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, make sure the 5-star ratings really do help us out. Let us know why you like listening to the podcast each and every week. I want to thank you guys for giving us the watch and watching all the way through on YouTube. I want to thank you guys for listening on podcast services around the world. And as always, have a good day, everybody.